The second one in the series, and the one we're going to talk about today, is entitled Stopping a Senseless Fight in Your Marriage. And so we're dealing with foundations, we're dealing with fights. Then we talk about how to have a sizzling fire, and then on faithfulness. So there's 4 different ones, and they may, some of them go a little bit longer than a week, but that's kind of the thought process we're at here. So we're going to talk about when there's conflict. Now, this doesn't only go in marriage. This can, a lot of these things are applicable to anything in life on conflicts, because invariably there are conflicts in life, whether it's in marriage, whether it's on the job, whether it's in parent-child relationship or whatever. There's going to be conflict, and you can't get away from it, but how do you deal with it when it does happen? So that's kind of where we're at in all this. And Ephesians chapter 4 is where we're going to use this morning as a jumping off place, but it's a wonderful thing. Whenever you have potential conflict, you're going to read this verse. And me too. And again, what was that? Amen. There again, there is a verse in Corinthians that women keep silent in the church. And that should be emphasized more and more as we go along with this thing. Sometime, and I will say this too, and we were kind of joking about it last week. It was Diane's idea, and that I'll do something special for her every day, little things, or she said little things, and I emphasize little things. And then this week being my week, and we did that. So she's saying she don't have much to live up to because I didn't do a whole lot, but I did little things. But a lot of times what happens when it comes to conflict is the expectation. And even when it comes to talking about the home, preaching about the home and all that, say that your relationship is right here. Okay, well, after you hear it taught and preached, everybody wants to go up here. But the fact of the matter is we need to be realistic and realize that we're probably not going to get up here, but we can probably get there. And so if you get frustrated because you're not there in a relationship, there's going to be conflict. If you realize, okay, I'm here, that's better than where we were, we are making progress here, then it will help in the relationship. Because you're never going to get to a point where there is not sometimes some issues. It's just, that's life. But how do you deal with them when they come up? And how do you deal with them church-wise? I grew up in a church where there was continual conflict. It's amazing God called me to preach, or I responded to the call to preach, considering what I grew up in. Because the preacher was run off every 2 or 3 years. I was just a boy. I didn't know what was going on, but I did know when we'd come to church on Sunday night in the First Baptist and only Baptist church of our little town, and when there wasn't usually very many people there, when it was packed out, there was something going on, and invariably it was a church vote. And so continually conflict. I mean, there was arguments, there were fussing, there were fist fights, all those things that are ridiculous, for adults to be doing, acting like a bunch of children. But that's the fact. And these were not uneducated people. We're talking the principal of the school. We're talking about the pharmacist. We're talking about people like that. And eventually the church split. And for years, it was in our small town, 700 people, big conflict. People wouldn't even speak to one another. People in families were divided over that, over conflict. So let me start off by reading Ephesians chapter number 4. And let's look down to verse number 29. Ephesians 4 and verse number 29. The Bible says, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying." That's the old saying that Mama used to always say: if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say nothing at all, okay? But that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby you are sealed unto the day of redemption. Verse 31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And here's the key verse. And here's why you can forgive people. Somebody says a lot of times, well, I'll forgive them if they ask for it. What they're really meaning, if they'll beg enough, I'll give them forgiveness. But here's the basis of forgiveness. Verse number 32, "And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another." Now here's the reason why. You don't forgive them because they deserve it. Has nothing to do with it. You're forgiving them even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. Forgiveness is based upon what he's done for us.
Right.
And so if you're waiting to say, okay, if they'll jump through every hoop that I put out there, I'll forgive them. Then you don't have any idea what forgiveness is, because God didn't make you do that. And so forgiveness is based upon the fact that he has forgiven us. So in turn, I should be able to forgive others. You should be able to forgive others. And this is not just marital. This is just life. I wrote this down. Someone said, what are some of the common marital problems that marriages have? One is having unrealistic, blissful expectations of marriage. And that's where you have to come down where the rubber meets the road and realize, okay, here's where we at. But now don't get to the point where you say, well, you just settle. Every one of us can have a better relationship with the Lord and with one another. But don't have unrealistic expectations. That happens sometimes even spiritually. I know early on as a Christian, I would read books, and some of my favorite books on prayer, and I recommend them to you, is E.M. Bounds. He was a Civil War chaplain, wrote books on prayer, and they're wonderful books, and they'll get you under conviction about praying. But they talk about praying 3 and 4 and 5 hours a day, and so you begin to read that, or you read George Mueller, how he would pray, and God supernaturally would answer the prayer. Now, God can do both of those things, but if you say, okay, I've got to have it just like that, and I remember Dr. Curtis Hudson, when he first got saved and read that, he said, when he would get up in the morning, it's when they would still bring the milk, to the door and all that, and it would come early in the morning. And he said when he was in bed and heard them bring the milk to the door, he thought, well, I should be up before the milkman, and so he got up before the milkman. Then he realized somebody else was up. He said, I'll get up before them and start reading my Bible and prayer. Eventually he thought, well, these guys got to be sleeping sometime. And he's wearing himself out. So don't have unrealistic expectations. People say, well, I'm going to read my Bible, 5 times this year. Well, that's good. If you've never read it through one time, I wouldn't try 5 times. I would try. So I spend 15 minutes a day. And there's a challenge. Let me throw this at you too. I know I'm all over the board. But a friend of ours, Brother Joey Harrison, them gave a challenge to their church to do this for a month. And catch y'all. That is, spend at least 15 minutes in prayer every day and spend 15 minutes reading your Bible every day. That's 30 minutes. That's not a lot of time. But spend that for a month and see the difference it will make. So there's unrealistic expectations. Then partners having very different role expectations, and who's to be working, who's cooking, who's deciding, all those issues. Thirdly, money issues. And can everybody say amen to this, that financial issues in a marriage, and it's usually pretty much early on in marriages, not always, but early on in marriages, is a big, big deal. And so financial issues many times, because when you're having a hard time paying bills, it makes you irritable. When you're irritable, you're going to be irritable with the one you're around all the time. Have you ever thought about this? And it's kind of hypocritical, but how many times we get along or treat somebody on the job or somebody that we see just occasionally better than we treat the one we're around all the time? But, and that's just the truth of the matter. And one of the reasons is we're not around them all the time. We're around a husband or wife or children all the time. And so it grates on your nerves, and sometimes you say things you shouldn't say. Poor communication is another issue. Sometimes in-law problems. Some other common problems: jealousy, unfaithfulness, criticism, nagging, bossiness, clinging dependency, domination, abuse, self-centeredness. All those things play into it also. In the things I gave out last week, I gave out 2 different things, and one of them was how to have a happy marriage and how to have a horrible marriage. I'm going to, for today, look at the horrible marriage, and we'll pick back up and get the happy marriage probably next week. But if you're going to have a horrible marriage, and I got to find my notes on this, you would think by now I've got 30 pages of notes and I would get better organized, but I don't seem to be there. But maybe one day when the millennial reign is in, somebody give me the horrible marriage one.
You want me to let you borrow mine?
Yes, ma'am. She's not giving it. I've got to borrow it, and I've got to return it, obviously. Okay.
That's right. We got to study that one.
Okay. I'm just going to run through these. Now, what I'm going to emphasize today is fighting in the marriage and how to stop a fight, start a fight, and what starts a fight, all those things. But just running through this, how to have a horrible marriage. And this can carry over to any kind of relationship or dealing with anybody, really. Be intolerant of your mate's ideas, thinking that you're the only one that has a right to have an idea and that you're right all the time. And don't say amen back there. Keep your mouth hushed on this one, okay? I'm just reading it. I can see Diane's mind going all this. Amen. That's him right there. I see that. Number 2, criticize your mate in public. If you got issues, it's best to deal with them in private. 3, store up anger that you drop like a bomb on your partner. And that probably deals with the 4th one on lines of communication, because if you allow things to build up to eventually you explode, that's not going to be good. 4, clog the lines of communication with your mate. Number 5, take your mate for granted. And all these things are so easy to do. We all do them, and we know that. Because when you've been married any length of time, some of y'all been married a lot longer than me, you fall into ruts, and we all know that. That's just, life to some degree. But 6, refuse to listen to your mate. 7, be insensitive to your mate's feelings or moods. Number 8, magnify your mate's faults or weaknesses. We all have them. Number 9, and this is a good one, rehearse your mate's past failures. The old saying is, you bury things, but some people bury things, the hatchet with the handle sticking up, so that whenever they need it, they can run out there and grab the handle and use it on somebody because of something they have done. And here's the point I would make to all of us. God does not, once we ask for forgiveness, God does not continually bring up our past failures and sins and beat us over the head with them. Can we all say amen to that?
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, if he don't do that, then we shouldn't be doing it one to the other. Number 10, attempt to reshape your mate's personality or remold their disposition. Make them what you want them to be, and that probably is more, dealing with the ladies. They have higher expectation. Us guys probably don't have that. Then look quickly on this one before I get to my point, how to have a good fight. Number 1, never yell at each other unless the house is on fire. It accomplishes nothing. Have you ever seen this? That when there is conflict, let's say it's on the job, let's say it's with a child, let's say it's anywhere, you got conflict, okay? When one person raises their voice, or you can tell by their voice, they're very agitated toward you, what's your natural tendency back to them? To be exactly the same way. You yell at me, I'll yell at you. You're mad at me, I'll be mad at you. Have you ever noticed the situation, and most of us are not spiritual enough to do this, but if we are, and we take time to think through this before we let our emotions rule us, if you speak back to someone in a calm voice, it's like pouring water on a fire. Things calm down a lot quicker and settle down. So be careful on the tone of your voice many times. Number 2, when talk becomes heated, take a walk, have prayer together. I got on to Dalton, and we got a lot of issues, and one of Dalton's issues, he gets it from his mother. He's got a temper issue. And he doesn't, all the good qualities he gets from his father. I know the lines of sin, I'm going to get struck dead right here. But no, we all have issues. And so Dalton can, the fuse can be lit pretty quick. And what I told him early on was, when that happens, do something. Go outside, do something physical, take a walk, get your mind off of that. Because when you sit there and think about it or stew upon it, that doesn't help the situation one little bit. And so do something to get your mind off of that. Then 3, if you have to criticize, do it carefully and lovingly. And number 4, never be critical. We just talked about this, of your spouse in public or in an embarrassing way. Number 5, don't bring up the mistakes of the past. There again, we just talked about that. Number 6, never condemn the whole person for one act or one event. You're stupid because you did that. Well, that was one thing they may have been not doing correct. Or, you're lazy. Well, that may not be them entirely. They may just didn't do that one thing. So be careful that you don't just throw a label on somebody because of one thing that upsets you. Number 7, Do not go to bed with an argument unsettled. Just stay up all night. That was a joke. Okay. No, you should settle it before you go to bed. Sometimes you may have to stay up all night before it's settled, but anyway. Number 8, when you have done something wrong, do not justify yourself or blame your spouse. Take a breath, say I'm sorry. Number 9, hold hands, hug, or lay close side by side when discussing. It diffuses a lot. Number 10, remember words can hurt. And number 11, have you forgotten someone? Your heated argument may be heard by your kids, may be heard by the neighbors. If it's loud enough to be heard by the neighbors, we got issues, okay? Unless your neighbor's real close, okay? If neighbors are hearing mine and Diane's arguments, we're in trouble, okay? Because we're not that close. But people do hear, and the Lord hears. Remember that. And would you think about this? Would you have the argument if the Lord was standing there? Well, if you're saved, He's inside of you. So we need to think about that. It takes 2 to have a quarrel. Number 13, hit below the belt when you resort to character assassination. And number 14, never threaten divorce or even leaving. Don't make threats. Threats don't accomplish anything. They never have, and they never will. And that's rather childish when you resort to threats. So that doesn't help the thing, okay? Look at the paper I gave you on fighting in the marriage. Now, we know men and women are different. That's obvious, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, across the board. In communication, men and women are totally different. And sometimes that brings conflict up because listening is hard work for men, but it brings happiness to women. Talking can intimidate men, but it nurtures intimacy for women. Men tend to report facts. Women want to share feelings. Okay? Somebody should say amen right there, because that's absolutely the truth, isn't it? In general, there may be exceptions to the rule. Men don't respond to hints. Here again. And there again, go back to my original comment about women keeping silent in the church until I ask you a question. Okay? There again. Men don't respond to hints, but here's the thing. You're going to have to just tell me. I can't pick up hints, okay? I'm not good at that. Gee, you going to say anything, you're just going to sit there.
I'm just sitting here.
You're just going to sit there.
This
He's just going to be a big coward today. He's not going to admit to anything. But this is definitely more a man versus a woman thing, because women expect men to pick up on the hints. Believe me, we are clueless. We're not getting it.
Amen.
So understand that before you get critical on that. Women are subtle and they're coded in their conversation. In romance for men is highly visual, but for women it's extremely personal and relational. Romance for a man is what he sees. Romance for a woman is what she feels. They're different. The needs are different. Women need to feel valued. Men need to feel successful. Women need to be heard. Men need to be praised. Women want to be interdependent, but men want to be self-sufficient. In time, they're different. Men do not think about time, but women value the quantity and the quality of time. Men tend to go with the flow, but women appreciate specific and creative ideas. In parenting, they're different roles. And see, God made us different. There's no reason to complain about us being different. God made us that way. Accept that. You wouldn't want your wife just like you. The fact that you're different allows you to blend together. Parenting. Mothers nurture, and dads provide strength. Mothers provide the emotional support, and dads provide a sense of security. So we're entirely different. So sometimes, because we're different, that does bring up issues. Okay, getting to where we're trying to get to. Well, let's go back. The order here, I don't know why I did it in this order. Maybe there was a reason, I don't remember. But let's start with number 2. We'll back up to number 1. What starts a fight? If you ever figure out, and there is a continual thing that every time that you bring it up is like lighting a match, the best thing to do is figure a way to not bring it up, or to bring it up in a way that doesn't cause a problem. If you argued about it 2 weeks ago, and you argued about it last week, if you're gonna bring it up this week, you're just gonna argue about it again. So you wanna do something different. What's the old saying? If you continue to do the same thing you've always done, you'll have the same results. So you need to realize that if this, whatever the issue is, if it's always called conflict, then bring it up in the same way. All it's going to do is continue to bring conflict. So what starts a fight? First of all, lack of communication. And there again, men and women are different. We all know that. Women want to discuss everything. They want to flesh everything out. Men usually are different. Men get over things quicker than ladies do. It takes women longer. They have to talk through everything. And that's a big deal because I'm not a talking through individual. When I'm over, I'm over. I'm ready to move on. It's okay. It's done. Yeah. Dewey called me a name and we got out there and we was going to wrestle and we both realized how old we were and decided not to wrestle. And so I'm over it. Okay. I'm not mad at Dewey no more. I moved on. Okay. Okay. We moved on. But, ladies have a disagreement. It may not end, that hour or that day or that week or that month or that year or that. But, they eventually, they'll end up eventually, if they're right with the Lord, they'll talk through it, and they'll hug next and they'll be okay. But they just don't get over it as quick. So the communication is extremely important, and that's hard because, like I said, I'm just different. I'm ready to move on. Diane's typical of all the other ladies here, and wants to discuss everything thoroughly and bring it up and talk through it. And how do you feel? I don't feel. I don't feel anything. I've done moved on. Don't have any feelings. I moved on, I told y'all, and Diane said I repeat myself, so let me repeat myself one time, then move on. When Dalton had the wreck and we looked at the car, we view things totally different. Now I was wrong on this one, but I admitted I was wrong. Revival has hit. Revival is. When she saw the car, she cried. When then I saw her cry, and I said, "He's all right. What you crying about? He's not hurt. He didn't break his leg. He's not in the hospital. He's all right." Because once I saw he was all right and saw the car, I moved on. She didn't. That's just the difference between men and women. So communication, a lot of times, or the lack of communication will start a fight. Then number two, and I'm not going to get into this really. I did this at the marriage retreat, but since we got different ages in here, I'm not going to get into this. But lack of intimacy, and it's not. Let me pause for a second. Not just physical on this one. But sometimes intimacy is just having a conversation. I tell you what intimacy may be, and here again, it's different for men and women. We all know that. But laying in bed at night, the TV's on, the TV's off, and just talking. Okay? That's a form of intimacy, especially for the lady versus the man. And so, but a lack of that sometimes causes a fight. Third, money. How it's spent, how it's saved. And here's the issue. If you got plenty of money in the fact that you're paying your bills and you're getting by and there's no issue, then money's not an issue usually. Where money becomes an issue is when we're having trouble paying the bills, when it is tight, when it is a struggle, and when you are frustrated, when you look at the bank account and you figure everything out and you think, well, man, where did all this go, blah, blah, blah. That's when it becomes an issue. Money becomes an issue. And so that's where you gotta, sometimes you settle things before they become a problem. Somebody needs to pay the bills. Both can't usually pay the bills, but somebody's got to pay the bills. Somebody's got to have their role. And when roles are usually established, this one does that one does that, and it doesn't matter who pays the bills, the man or the woman. I don't really have an issue with that. Some women are just better at keeping up with things than men are. Some men prefer to do that. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but there needs to have roles for that. Everybody have their role, and usually when you have your role, that will solve a lot of issues. Number 4, children. When to have them early on, how many to have, how far apart to have them, consistency in training and discipline, all those things. There needs to be a unity on that. Now, most of y'all kids are grown, so I realize that. Some of us not, but most of the kids are grown. And there has to be, but you remember back probably, if one wanted to handle a child and discipline one way and another one another way. And here's a thing probably not that good, but it's been happening since Adam. I guarantee you when Adam and Eve had them 2 boys, it happened. I guarantee you when Cain misbehaved, Eve said, you just wait till your daddy gets home. Wherever Adam's at with a club, clubbing an animal, when he gets back to this cave, you are in trouble. Well, that sounds good, but what it basically does is, it's the threat that daddy's coming in with a big club, and I remember those days. My dad, it was back in the 60s or 70s, and he had this big white belt. I think it must have been that white. I don't know why he got a white belt, but he got a white belt. And Mom always said, you wait till your daddy gets home. He's taking that big white belt off and he's whipping you. Well, okay, there's better ways of handling. We tend to say that. And I've told the kids for years, you wait till your mom gets home. She's going to handle it. Yeah, don't threaten. There's better ways to handle that. And be consistent in how you handle it. Understand how you handle it. And here's another thing too. When you handle things, don't handle them when you're angry. Here again, most of y'all's kids are grown, so you're not whipping your kids. But if you ever decide to whip your neighbor's kids, remember this, okay? Don't do it when you're angry. Because if you do something when you're angry, you tend to go overboard with it. Now, if a child needs whipping, I believe a child should be disciplined. I believe there's times you ought to whip a child, in spite of what our society says. But take time to cool off before you do it. And do what is right because it is right. Don't do it because you're just angry. And we all have issues because if my boys in the past did something and it made me angry, yeah, if I've dealt with it right then, I probably have dealt with it more harshly than I would have if I had cooled off for 5 minutes. But now this goes about anything in life. If you get upset, the best thing, and we all can learn this lesson, the best thing is to cool off a little bit before you deal with it. So that's another issue that always starts a fight. Then in-laws. So the best thing to do, just move to Alaska and hope they don't like cold weather. They won't come and bother you. Or do like Dr. Joseph. If somebody asked me, why did Dr. Joseph move to America? Well, it's to get away from in-laws, but then his mother-in-law followed him over here, so that didn't work either. So move to Nigeria. They may not follow you. I don't know. In-laws, and we all know this can be a blessing or cannot be. And, in-laws can really be a good blessing because if you live near them and you got small children, they can help take care of them and various things. As long as you realize that you need to stay out of one another's business. You raised her, you raised him, but now they're married, okay? And, they got to make some mistakes and they got to work through things and they don't need you to tell them what to do because you didn't want your mom or her mama to tell you what to do when you got into it. So we need to remember that. Then anger, violent, destructive to property, physical, abusive, or verbal abuse, that always starts the fight. Lack of intimacy, infidelity or moral depravity, committing adultery, incest, rape, or pornography. Any of those things are all going to start a fight. There's probably 1,000 more things you probably in your mind are thinking about something that's not even listed here, but starts a fight. But the key would be that if you know something's going to start a fight, then don't do that particular thing. If a fight is starting and you see it starting, then diffuse it in some way. But I'll tell you something. Some people love fighting. I realized this over the years. Some people thrive on contention and fighting. Some people are drama kings and drama queens. It's not all women, some men too. And some people just thrive on conflict. I don't like conflict. I'd rather not have conflict. I like peace and tranquility. But some people, so if you see something, then diffuse the situation either by walking away, cooling off, or whatever it takes. And okay, let me say this too, and I can back it up both ways. But if one partner walks away, the other one following them out the door is not going to help the situation. Okay? You have to have some distance. Okay? To illustrate this, Dr. Joseph and Miss Woomy are having it out. And pots and pans are flying across the room. And he's telling her things in Nigeria that we can't repeat here. So they're going at it. She's got the knife. She's running through the kitchen trying to catch him. So it's bad over there, okay? The law's about to be called. It's going to be rough over there. So he finally said, okay. He says, I'm just going to walk outside in the yard. Okay. Well, he walks out in the yard. And here she comes right behind him. Follow him through the yard. Now, that's not going to solve anything. That's not helping anything. So there's got to be some distance, and there's got to be some cooling off, and that's just a practical thing. And I remember this even when in the school days, when, there'd be a fight, we'd have recess, and then somebody would fight or something, if you could separate them for a while, usually that solved all the issues. And so sometimes just some space or time helps solve. But if you know something is going to start one, then don't do it or diffuse it quickly before it escalates. Because when things escalate, the damage that's done then. For example, if I'm angry and I say something out of anger in a hurtful way, I can ask forgiveness, and I should for that, but the damage has been done. Okay? But if I catch myself before then and think, okay, you don't need to say that, you need to take a break, you need to cool off, you need to read some scripture, you need to do this or that, then when I come back and don't do what I would have done or don't say what I would have said, then the damage has not been done. Okay? Then let's back up to how to stop a fight. Okay, the contention is there. And I gave a ridiculous illustration, pots and pans flying, and hopefully it never gets to that stage. Most of the time it's just, disagreeing. And sometimes it doesn't mean escalated voices. Sometimes it's just disagreeing. But whatever stage it is, once it starts, how do you stop it? Okay? Now list three things here. First of all, discuss the problem. And here again, I told you earlier, it's the difference between men and women. We tend to get over it a little bit easier. They want to thoroughly discuss it. But listen to what the spouse is saying and try to understand why they see it that way. Now here again, there's men are from Mars, women are from Venus. The old book that was written, we're different. Men in general, there's differences, but men in general tend to be a little bit more logically minded. Women tend to be more emotionally minded or depend upon feelings and emotions. There again, some people are different. Sometimes the roles are reversed, but in general, that's probably a general statement. And so you got to understand that just because I see things logically, 1, 2, 3, that see it, put an exclamation point, it's done, doesn't mean that she sees it 1, 2, 3, an exclamation point. And sometimes, in spite of my best efforts to explain why it's logical, they still don't see that it's logical, okay? So I can be frustrated by that. You can be frustrated by that if you're a logically minded person, when the other person is more emotionally minded. But here again, both parties got to see something here. The logical minded person has to understand the other person is just emotional and they see things different. But also the emotional person has to understand that the logical person sees things a certain way too. So it's a give and take here on both sides to realize that there is a difference and you deal with things differently. Number two, you reason with each other. And unless you want the fight to go on, and what's the old saying, the guy come in, that he was talking to another guy, and this guy just got married. He said, man, we had it out the other night. And the older guy said, well, me and my wife only had one argument. And the young guy said, well, tell me how, how'd you have the argument? What did it start over? How'd you end this thing? And the guy said, well, the argument started the day after we got married. It hadn't ended yet. So, eventually, unless you want the argument to go on, ad nauseum, to use a Latin phrase, to make yourself sick and without ending, then you got to stop it some way. And to stop the fight, you're going to have to learn, you're going to have to eventually come to some kind of agreement. And here's the thing, too, if you haven't figured this out, usually nobody's going to get everything they want. I don't like that, but that's just the truth. None of us are going to usually get everything we want in settling a disagreement. Usually there's got to be some meeting of the minds and some coming to a conclusion. And you can't settle, if you're working a job and you own a company, you're a supervisor, whatever. If the person doesn't do what you want to do, you can fire them, okay? You can discipline them. Okay, when you come over to a marriage, that don't work. You know, I mean, you can't fire somebody. There has to come a meeting of the minds. You have to, but here's where sometimes I think some people say they want to stop a fight, but they don't really want to stop a fight because eventually everybody's got to put a period at the end of it. It just can't go on forever. Eventually, whether you understand it or not, or ever how you're feeling or not, eventually you've got to put a period to things. And it has to move on. Otherwise, there is no end to it. It's a continual cycle, and just doesn't work. Then thirdly, you settle on a resolution. I've alluded to this. The goal is to find a solution that is satisfying, or get this, at least acceptable to everybody. Again, you may not particularly like the way it ends, but at least it ends. We don't have that here, but there's some churches where people have disagreements, and for years she didn't speak to her or he didn't speak to him, blah, blah, and the thing just never ends, and it festers and it comes up occasionally and it never ends. But eventually you've got to put a period, and things have to end. Thirdly, we notice what starts a fight. Secondly, how to stop a fight. Thirdly, how to settle a fight. Number one, acknowledge the wrong. Now, here again, I'm not saying that, to admit to something that you don't admit to, but here's the general truth, okay? In any kind of disagreement, doesn't matter how it started or who said what, usually if it goes on for any length of time, both of them have some wrong in it. One may have more wrong than another, but if we'd handled it right, it probably wouldn't have gone on that long. So there's probably enough wrong on both sides to say, okay, I was wrong. Maybe you were wrong for not selling it early. Maybe you was wrong for the tone of your voice, for getting upset, or saying this or saying that. But probably in every disagreement, there is wrong. And if I won't admit we're wrong, it's going to be a long life. It's going to be a long, long life. The joke is, and Diane is correct, in my family, we do have some degree of a know-it-all attitude. And don't look at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. Some of you are just about as bad, okay? And I think my dad and my brother may be a little bit worse than me, but thinking we know everything. Now, I understand that I don't know everything, even though I think at times I may know everything. So there's times, I see humor in my problem. Y'all just laugh at me. I tell you what we need to do. I need to sit down and let y'all tell this, because I confess things, but y'all don't confess anything. Y'all just look okay out there where the preacher's a horrible person. I wish he was as good as me.
Then you take it with the team.
We love you.
I'm taking it for the team, okay. Acknowledge you're wrong. Secondly, ask for forgiveness. Okay, I was wrong about it. Forgive me, okay? That's not easy to do. A lot of times, like I said, especially in the heat of the moment, that's not easy to do. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, they don't want to forgive. But ask for forgiveness. Then thirdly, accept the apology, okay? And, not just say, okay. Well, that's not accepting an apology. I can see y'all's issues, and I can read y'all.
Like acceptance for me.
I mean, you say, well, they were not genuine. Well, what do you know about it? Maybe they were not, but at least they asked for forgiveness. And if somebody asks, that's more than the other person at that point has done, so accept the apology. Then affectionately make up, whether it's kissing, hugging, whatever, shaking hands. You won't do it. Find someone you may not be wanting to hug at that time, but get this one. But this is the key to everything, and I done mentioned it 3 times. Amnesia, leave it in the past. Okay, we had the disagreement, we discussed it. She's told me how she feels, and I've told her how I feel, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we get to it and put a period on it. Okay, love you, love you. Okay, life is good. 2 hours later. Now, you remember what we was discussing? Blah, 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 blah. That don't help. Get amnesia. Now you say, well, and here's an old saying. I can forgive, but I can't forget. Then you've really never forgiven. Now, I realize you can't wipe things out of your mind, but by making that statement, I can forgive, but I cannot forget. Ephesians 4:30, verse 32, the verse we read, he forgave and he forgot. And because he forgave and he forgot, I can forgive and I can forget. But now, if you want to fight throughout all eternity and spend the millennial reign wrestling on, street in Jerusalem, then just don't forget. Keep bringing it up. Beat somebody over the head with it. I mentioned last week a couple that one time I counseled had been married 50 plus years, and because of a mistake he made, and it was wrong. It was he was unfaithful to her early on in marriage, and one time, and no excuse for it. But 50 years later, she's still beating him over the head with that. Okay, he's wrong. He asked for forgiveness. It's not a continual thing. I realize, but you can't pay throughout eternity. Eventually, you got to get beyond it. And, she didn't solve anything by beating him over the head and by asking him, there's accountability, but when you can't go to the store in a relationship without somebody, checking up on you, then there's something wrong with that relationship. Amnesia, leaving the past, the things to remember. God has ordained the home. We have no doubt about that from the book of Genesis. The devil will oppose the home. We got no problem with that. The Bible has orders for the home. And lastly, the couple has obligations in the home. And so look at that and think about that. Next week, we'll talk about how to maybe keep the relationship good throughout the years. It starts off good, but how to keep them settling and maybe how to keep a little fire, in the fireplace a little bit.